I'm good, man. This is a great name for a show, Pre-Shift.
You like that? Yeah,
Yeah, I love
I've
it.
been doing some live streams recently, doing like pre-shift and then doing shift drink. Sometimes like late on a Saturday night when people might be working or what I found in the last couple weeks is people are kind of missing the community of being in the restaurants. So doing the whole pre-shift or the shift drink type of platform, I think it's been fun, just kind of chit chatting and seeing what's going on with different people. So Justin, it's awesome to have you, man. It's awesome to connect. You're out in Seattle where this whole pandemic started, at least kind of here in the U.S. I definitely want to touch on some of that, but before we bounce into that, maybe you can just talk to everybody about you and your career. You've done some really cool things, at a pretty young age. From working in top Michelin star restaurants to now you have your production company. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I grew up in Seattle. I was raised by a single mom who didn't really like food that much, and my dad would get to come visit us every 2 weeks, and he prioritized us, my sister and I, as kids pretty heavily. And so like my only real contact with nice food, and this is coming from like a tiny 1,500 person town in Wisconsin where pizza and burgers and chicken wings was like the norm, was like my dad would take us on road trips to Toronto, and we would go to down to Florida or go to Boston to visit some of his friends from India. And so it was like food was never like a big part of my life. I was an athlete growing up. I was on the math team. I played jazz trumpet. Like I dabbled in a bunch of different things, but none of them were like, I really think I could do this and like be happy getting paid for it. And that was up until like my senior year of high school. I don't really remember. Like I grew up watching Emerald. Like I appreciated the Food Network kind of growing up, and I loved how Alton Brown would explain food.
Yeah,
but I
totally.
never I don't have the quintessential chef story of like I stood next to my Nona's apron straps and shelled peas.
Right.
Like, that's not my story. What did happen was I graduated high school, and the only thing I knew is that I wanted to get out of Wisconsin. And so going to New York, I went to the Culinary Institute of America for college, like right when I graduated. That was like, it was a super clean path to like get out of Dodge basically. And then also get to really specially dive in. Like I'm the type of person that just gets obsessed with something if it sparks my interest, and I just have to like dig to the darkest depths of it to feel satisfied, which has been great. Going to CIA was really good for me because I appreciate structure, and I am kind of like that type A kind of high achiever type of person. So put in a competitive environment, I will want to kind of like excel. That's just my nature. And so that was really good for me. And what that ended up doing was getting like paving the way to getting an externship at Per Se, which was amazing. I really wanted to go there and work after I graduated culinary school. They told me we might have a job for you in 4 months. You should go get a line cook job somewhere in New York City, and we'll call you. And I was chomping at the bit to go be a line cook somewhere. And so I staged at this place called Atera in New York City, where I met this guy, Greg Backstrom, who now owns Olmsted in Brooklyn. And he told me that I should go check out this guy, Curtis Duffy, in Chicago. And so I contacted him, somehow got an interview. I was the youngest person on the opening team of his restaurant, which was Grace, that is now closed.
Oh, that's cool. You opened it up. Nice.
Yeah. If you see that, if anybody watches that documentary, there's beardless Justin, and I look like a baby in that documentary.
But, oh, really?
Yeah,
nice.
I'm in that documentary. It was very eye opening. It was like I turned 21 and had my first legal beer at that restaurant. So it was good times. But the Chicago restaurant scene was kind of like getting to be a lot for me at that young age. Like I didn't have any friends. I did put out like a full podcast episode on my own podcast, which is called the Emulsion. And I put that out maybe like 2-3 weeks ago, talking about like I fell into like a fit of depression at that restaurant. And it was really hard for me. And kind of wanting to be productive, I used the network that I had from working at Per Se and the old executive sous chef at Per Se was going to be the chef de cuisine of the French Laundry. And his name is David Breeden. I emailed him, asked him for a job, and ultimately, ended up moving out to Napa to work at French Laundry for a while. And that was like, it's such an institution. Like, it was satisfying all of the kind of like chef dreams that I had for myself. I learned so much technique there, systems thinking, uh, just like the finesse and the high end execution, and just how to think about a tasting menu when you write a menu every single night after a 12-hour day. Like,
Right.
that was
And
like
all
so
the ingredients have to be new and different, right?
yeah, like no repeat ingredients on the menu. Like, sometimes you'll do beef again, but it has to be what's called a different set. So if you did like potatoes, spinach, and bordelaise sauce, it can't, like, it has to switch. Like, you have to do like beets
Mhm.
and leeks going into the next day, which was like amazing for someone like me who like loved that constant kind of like iterating and creating. After that, I had a roommate who was wanting to get his first job at a wine school. He was living with me in Napa, and he needed he wanted to get familiar with the wine program. And there was a guy who was uh, at Per Se with all three of us, me, my old roommate, and this guy who was half Norwegian, half American. He was opening his first restaurant in his home city of Bergen, Norway. And I just remember like sitting just like we're sitting here now. And my roommate was like, I think I'm going to move to Norway. And I was like, all right, man, see ya. Like, have fun. Maybe I'll come visit you. And it got to be like the end of my tenure at French Laundry. And I was like, I really want to travel. I was like, I could, just blow all my savings and go do the stereotypical like chef tours Europe for a month, and I could just have a good time. Or I could contact this Norwegian guy and see if he'll let me work for him for 6 months and kind of like extend that time. So like I can, go to Paris, I can go to London, I can go to Barcelona, I can do all these things because I'll be closer to all these places if my home base is in Scandinavia. And the long story short of that is I became a sous chef there after 10 months, and I stayed for almost 3 years. That restaurant like really changed me. I had a lot of frustrations in, and this chef was a guy who was like, he worked at Alinea in like the early days. He worked his way up to become the butcher at Blue Hill at Stone Barns.
Oh, nice.
He worked the meat station at Per Se, which is like the highest line cook position you can get to
Yeah.
before you become a sous chef. Um, and I really enjoyed working with him because it was just like I was getting to do all of the techniques and learn all of these things with someone who was trying to pioneer their own vision of cuisine without the politics that I was used to in the Michelin star restaurants. Like it's just like you don't always get moved up because of merit. You get moved up sometimes because you've stayed there the longest, or you're buddy with the guy who's like the gatekeeper in that
Hmm.
sense. And I really didn't like that about a lot of the Michelin star restaurants I was at. And so, to give you context, French Laundry, I think it was like 40 cooks at French Laundry. And when I went to Liesverket, which is the restaurant in Bergen, it was four of us in the kitchen.
Oh,
And so it
wow.
was
Yeah.
like, I learned so much faster, and I got so much more experience. And we were getting in like half pigs, and like we were doing 100-kilo orders of fish every week that I would have to butcher for my own station. And just like tons and tons of amazing skills that I was able to develop during that time. Like I had a whole budget of pickling and fermenting projects that I got to keep throughout the year when I like wanted to start that program. And that was really, really amazing. Um, it got to be towards the end of my time there, and Chef Chris, who's the owner there, Christopher Hautuft, he asked me as I was leaving, kind of like, listen, man, like I gave a year notice before I left, and he was like, what do you want to learn? Like in these, like, what do you want to do in your last, kind of like 10 to 12 months while you're here? And I was like, among some other things, I said, I really want to get a sense of the numbers. Like, I really want to sit in on these finance meetings. Like, we had one person who kind of like pseudo managed the bookings, got all of our visa and legal situations in order. And then she also managed the accounts, like the accounting. And so I was like, I want to be in those meetings when you two are talking. And so what ultimately ended up happening during that process is that I really got a sense for like, it started to make sense to me why I would stage at places in New York where the tasting menu was $275, but the cooks were having to change for work in dry storage. And like, why isn't, like giving healthcare or larger vacation things part of the process? And it was just like the numbers that I was seeing as part of these meetings were just like not adding up. Like we would just like smash it out of the park for a month, and we'd be like, we killed it, guys. We made an 8% profit this month. And it was like, it really just, it's not to say that every single meeting is like that, but or every single restaurant is like that, but it really like gave me something to, like, I could connect the dots. I could connect the dots of like, it's really hard to do this, and here's the data to go along with that. And so when it was time to move back to the US, I got to Seattle, and I was like, the thing that I want to do with my time and these skills that I've developed over my career is I want to find a way to, what if I ran my business in a way where it was like, we strive for 30% profit. What does that look like? And what does that give me the ability to do, moreover? Not just so that I can stack money, but what does that give me the ability to like say, like, how does that change my decision-making process? And so I also at the same time was dealing with this conundrum that was, I don't know what my food looks like. Like, what does Justin's food look like?
Right.
Because it's like every single menu I was writing was like this weird Frankenstein hodgepodge of it. It was presented like French Laundry, but it had like this Scandinavian kind of element to it. And my dad's from India, and so I was like playing around with those things because I thought that had to be like part of my identity in some sort of way. And I love the product of the Pacific Northwest. Bergen is a sister city of Seattle, so it was like, it made total sense for me to move here because it's just like I love the kind of like the mountains and the ocean vibes. And so that ultimately got me to a point where I was like, I need to start doing pop-ups. And so it was like my little ragtag team of people. It was me, another chef, a videographer, because during my time in Norway, I was like, as I was thinking about all these numbers things, I was like, what if it was like, there's so much that happens at a restaurant that people are willing to watch. It's just so difficult to justify the spend to put it out into the world when you're already operating on such razor thin margins. So I was like, I see myself doing something with content in the future. So I need to teach myself how to produce videos, edit them, publish on YouTube, do audio things. And in a way, it was really valuable for me to have that pop-up experience, because it was like I did get to write a ton of menus that now, like, I feel like I have a decent repertoire of dishes, which is amazing. But then also it gave me all the confirmation in the world of like, this is what I want to do in some way, shape, or form. But I was getting burnt out doing all of the marketing, all of the finances, staffing the things, sourcing the product, dealing with rentals and venues, and all of these things. I met a woman at a party, and she was producing the party, and just like hospitality people, we were chatting, and she's like, oh, well, I do events and I do dinners sometimes and blah blah blah, but I'm not a chef. And I was like, oh, well, I do pop-ups, but like I'm getting really burnt out doing all of this work. And so we ultimately decided that I would become resident chef at her company, which is called Voyager's Table. And so the theory behind that was that I was able to have all of the back end, all of the logistics sorting, all of the kind of like headachy things that I didn't want to do, because I wanted to do as much cooking as I could. And then she could now flip the script on all of the clients that she was taking care of, and she could offer 6-course plated tasting menu dinners for them. She could offer like amazing presentations for cocktail hours for these guests. And it was hitting the margins that I wanted to hit when I was speaking on all these things. So it's like I had to take my preconceived notions of what I thought my life was going to be like, because my ultimate goal when I started this chef journey was to have a 3 Michelin star restaurant in Chicago. Like, I grew up in the Midwest. I thought that was going to be my home base, and I pivoted a lot, and I am much happier for it. So that's more or less what I do now. So we take care of people in Seattle, in Vancouver. I have a self-titled YouTube channel where I do a bunch of stuff to help professional chefs improve their career. That comes with a podcast, like I mentioned, called the Emulsion. And yeah, that's a TLDR.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Yeah. Justin has a bunch of great content out there. Uh, really thoughtful stuff. And we've done this before. It's good to get back up together with you, Justin, man. Anyone out there that has some questions, I see a few kind of rolled in here. Definitely leave them in the comments, and we'll get to them kind of as we go.
Totally.
Um, it takes what it seems, and I feel like this is what I've experienced as well, but it takes kind of doing both ends of the spectrum. Like you said, you did like the three Michelin star restaurants. Then you also did the kind of smaller, four people in the kitchen. Understanding kind of both ends of the spectrum helps you to figure out kind of what it is that maybe you end up wanting to do, right?
Totally. I think, and to even before all of that, CIA has this thing where like they make you do 6 months of restaurant experience before you
Right.
go and start the program. And keep in mind that I was coming just out of high school, and so I took my senior year of high school to do like a culinary program at a local community college, and that ultimately got me the job at like they called it a World Bistro in Wisconsin, and the team at that kitchen was the head chef, the dishwasher, and me. And
Yeah.
that was like I love those teams because it just like it feels less symphony orchestra and it feels more like a jazz quartet. And I really like that vibe where it's like because when you really hit your stride in those types of kitchens, it's like there's to
Yeah.
me there's nothing like it. Um,
Yeah.
because
Totally.
it's just humming.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah. No, that's
that being
awesome.
said, though, like I do think that there's a lot of people who would benefit from the larger quirks, I'm going to call them, of like bigger systemized organizations
Hmm.
where you have the centralized recipe catalog where
Right.
if you're going to make black olive puree, everybody makes black olive puree the same. And I think what that gives you the ability to do is it allows things to scale.
Hmm.
And I think that helps in certain instances. I know that there's a lot of people who like they have the mentality that they're going to be small and they want to stay small forever, and that comes with its own set of quirks. And so I don't necessarily think that one is better than the other. I think that um, in the same way in the marketing space that we're talking about, like brands wanting to be more like people and people wanting to be more like brands, I
Hmm.
think the same thing can apply to like big restaurants should try to be a little bit scrappier sometimes, and small scrappy places should strive to be a little bit more organized and systemized. Um,
Definitely. Well, and if
so
nothing else, getting the experience at more of a corporate environment gives you the understanding, like you said, of the systems. And at the end of the day, if I'm a customer and I come in and have the cheeseburger or the filet au pois, whatever it might be, it should be the same on Monday night is on Tuesday night. And I feel like one of the problems with the smaller independent places is not having those systems in place. And then if you do have just one location and it's chef owned, but you want to maybe open up another location, or if you want to be able to take Thursday night off, you have to have those systems in place to know that, all right, well, this isn't go out the right way when I'm not around.
yeah, the quote that I read that really stuck with me was if you can't leave your the business, like if you can't leave the business that you've made to go on a holiday to Disney with your kids or go sit on a beach in Thailand for a week, if that if and the business can't operate in the same level without you, you have a job, not a business.
Yeah,
And
for
that really
sure.
stuck with me because it's like so many people think that like it has to be this thing where I'm in there every day, I see every single plate, and it just all of that got debunked for me because it was just like because I had the same mentality. That's why I was running these self-titled pop-ups where I wanted to cook every single little thing. And it's not to say that that doesn't have its place. I just want people to be thoughtful about kind of expectations versus reality.
Yeah, well, and it's hard for a chef owner. I mean, like I can tell you for myself personally, like when I had my restaurant, like I wanted to see every single thing that came out of the kitchen, and like, but at a certain point, you're kind of holding things up. Like if everything has to be approved by you, first of all, like your team's gonna get very frustrated, right? They're gonna feel like they don't have any sort of ownership, empowerment, all that kind of stuff. But then you're kind of things are kind of getting stuck with you. So for sure, man. Here's one question for you, Justin. Anthony Nelson asked, I heard you say earlier that your father came from India. In your restaurant, do you try to incorporate some family recipes into the menu?
I don't have a restaurant, to clear that
Right.
up, which is, you know,
But
probably
events
in
that,
events in my menus. Yes, I kind of. So the thing that gets me most excited about Indian food in general is that the fine dining version of Indian food, oftentimes for people, because the cuisine itself is so like you'll stew lentils for like a day, like an entire day. Like
right.
a friend of mine has like a 3-day braised lentils recipe.
And is this
Or
more like Northern Indian or
yeah,
Southern?
northern,
Northern.
yeah,
Okay.
which is where my dad's from.
Yeah, that's
And
what I
that's kind of
figured.
like my context for it. So, or you'll do like like you'll do a braised goat dish, and it takes so long. There's so many layers to it, and what ultimately ends up happening on the fine dining side of things, which is kind of like my preference for serving things like elevated versions of insert dish, is that you'll get a small little spoon or a little bowl of that presentation, and it's called fine dining. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So like you'll get a little tiny bowl of stewed lentils with like a radish fancy garnish on top, and it's
Right.
like, oh, this is fancy dal, and it's like, I don't necessarily think so. And
Right.
so my whole thing is like, what is kind of like, where are the playful elements of this dish, and how can you do like, I don't shy away from the word fusion. I think that it's just like, it's so baked into everything now. Like you can't, tomatoes aren't actually Italian. Like, as far back as you want to take it, like there's
Right.
inspiration constantly flowing in and out from everywhere. So to give you an example, there's a dish that my dad really loves in Old Delhi. It's called a Raj Kachori, and it's basically like, picture like a puff, it's usually made with whole wheat or chickpea flour, and it's like a flat dough that they roll out, and then they fry it in oil, and it puffs up like a pomme souffle, and then they crack the top open and just throw a bunch of snacks in it. So like crispy chickpeas,
Oh,
wonton
nice.
crackers, onions, potatoes, cilantro, like, and then they smother it with like yogurt sauce and tomato chutney and
Awesome. Yeah.
mint cilantro chutney, and it looks like an abomination, but my dad loves it, and it's a textural marvel. Like when you're eating it, it's so delicious because
And
every
different
single bite is
flavors
so interesting.
different
Yeah,
flavors going on.
yeah, tons of stuff in your mouth happening. And so I do a dish which is like inspired by that, in the realm of like, it's a fun street food abomination, but I'm inspired by the time that I spent at all these places that would have like seasonal vegetable salads. So I think about like the garguillu from Michel Bras, Satio Tempestas from Franzen in Stockholm, where I staged for a week. Um, French Laundry had like really beautiful salads while I was there. And so I take that same puff and I use this like similar flavors for the sauces, but then it's like carrots shaved raw and then pickled, and then radishes that are just steamed or glazed in butter, and then asparagus done this way. And so it ultimately ends up being like, it's a 30 component dish, but it's like, it bridges this gap between like fine dining
Hmm.
execution and street food. It's actually fun to eat.
Right.
Um, so that,
And it's something that's yours, right?
totally.
And
And
that's
so
where.
that's like, I hope that, and I try to do that with every dish, and sometimes I will do like, um I've done like a lamb seek kebab, which is like inspired by this place called Karim's in Delhi, which is just like spices, yogurt, and ground lamb that's like molded around a long stick and then grilled over open fire. Like I will do that at a dinner, and um because it's just delicious.
Mhm.
And that's not anything new. So that's an example of like taking recipes that I really like my auntie just really loves making parantas. Like she makes it, which is like a layered flatbread.
Mhm.
Um, and like I'll make those sometimes as like a side dish to something else. But yeah, I really try to draw that line between like, what is a dish that is in and of itself something that I would want to do, versus like, am I trying too hard to make at home Indian food masquerading as fancy food? Because ultimately, like, you go to India and the best food that you're going to have is at someone's home.
You're right.
Um,
Right. Right.
And the culture for restaurants in India is also very different, where in at least northern India, the best restaurants societally are like at the hotels, because you would be kind of silly to have like a standalone restaurant. Um, and that's changing, and
Yeah.
it's always evolving. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the things that that I think about is having worked, like it takes working again, going back to like the bigger corporate type environment, smaller place. It takes working those different places to know kind of what is your cuisine, and trying and failing. And I can't remember who it was. It was
I'm still
one of the
listening. I gotta plug my laptop in. Keep going.
yeah, one of the grandfathers of the industry was talking about, like, at the end of the day, like, it has to be delicious, right? And what does delicious look like? It can look like a number of things.
I think I think that's a Grant Achatz quote. I don't
I was
100% remember,
I knew
but
some.
yeah, because it was in relation to him talking about. I think this was when like molecular gastronomy was really getting off the ground, and everyone was asking like, what's possible with food, and because his training was so, I mean, he was like at French Laundry forever,
Right.
and so for him, it needs to be playful and it needs to be new and exciting and
It has
creative,
to be
but it
delicious.
can't come at the expense of, like you're saying.
Right. And that's where for them, like, you look at Alinea, like, they test the boundaries in every possible way. But if being delicious is the number one thing, then that's okay. Some other kind of questions too. I want to get to Eric Garcia asked about cloud kitchens, and that could maybe tie into. I do want to talk to Justin about the industry right now. Obviously, things with the whole COVID-19 have been pretty crazy. We're seeing it where you are over on the West Coast. I'm over on the East Coast, and then pretty much everywhere in between. What are your thoughts as you've kind of heard people in the industry with kind of the way things were, how things have been going the last 6 to 8 weeks? Obviously, not great, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I published a podcast probably an hour before this with that goes like super deep in like an hour long stuff on like I took a bunch of articles and kind of like summarized my thoughts on them. So if anybody wants to go listen to that, like that'd be great, because I'm all about starting a conversation during this time. I don't think that I also answered some questions in a Q&A a couple weeks back where someone asked, like, what are you going to do during this, going forward during this time? And to tie all of that said to say up in a bow, I think that
Well,
we
and
look at
before you into that, it's
yeah,
the Emulsion podcast.
yeah, the Emulsion podcast. And it's interesting because I think that there's this big sense of I just want to get back into it. I just like think we like once the restrictions get lifted, it's going to be okay. And I don't think, and maybe they do, but I really want to hammer home the point that you could open the doors back up, but if guests don't feel safe coming into your place, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And no amount of marketing or new menus or creativity or discounted prices are going to be able to change someone's mind that it's probably not going to be okay to come into your place unless we decide what these new rules are. They're new societal rules. And so I think that before anybody starts to make chefs guilty of not serving free meals to people, or taking sponsorship deals with brands, or any of the kind of like the shit talking that goes on right now, I think the biggest question we need, like, safety needs to be number one priority right now. Like, does everyone in the kitchen have to be wearing a mask? What is our glove culture going forward? Is there some sort of combo with hand washing and tools?
Well, and
Like,
Justin, before
everybody's HACCP plans are going to have to change.
yeah, Dave Chang and
Yeah,
Wiley were talking about that the other day on
totally.
his podcast, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that'd be crazy to think of, like, your whole kitchen operation is one big HACCP plan. I mean, think about
Totally.
the amount of work that's going to take. I mean, most restaurants don't even have a HACCP plan. Maybe they
Yep.
have one for like sous vide or something like that. But
Totally. And like, is there going to be this culture where it's going to literally, in order to operate to the code that the government or the FDA or your state's health department lays out, is it going to lead to a place where certain people who just want to be small and they just want to cook and they just want to like they have their one pizza place, they just want to have a pho shop, they just want to have a chef's counter. Is there going to be a new society where you get to the door and you sign a waiver where it's literally like we operate how we want to operate and we can't take responsibility if you get sick or not, because it's like we can't reasonably, at the size that we're at, get to the point where we make the government happy. I don't
Right.
know.
Well,
And
and
none
like
of us
I
know
mean,
that.
right now, you anywhere where you have a an undercooked steak or egg or whatever else, you have to have the disclaimer, because
Yeah,
raw or undercooked
exactly.
meat
Yep,
could
yep.
be
And
had
so
to
like,
your health.
is there something on that menu where it's like, just so you know, guys, like we really appreciate, like we really take your safety seriously, but like we can't, we aren't comfortable at work in masks all day, wearing gloves, like not touching certain surfaces and doing all this stuff. Like we temperature check our people, blah 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 blah. If someone's sick, they're told to go home. But like, yeah, I think it's too. My word of caution that I gave people is like it's too early right now to throw stones and
Hmm.
like to talk shit on any, like everybody knows it's stressful, but to like throw shade and talk smack and do all these things is like super super unproductive. And I just want to like I want to put that flag in the ground, because I also did another completely separate interview with my friend Ray DeLucci from Line Cook Thoughts. Are you have you been on his show yet?
No,
You
no,
guys should
I'll
definitely
check it
connect.
out though.
I want to connect you guys because he's really doing some awesome stuff, and he's writing a book too at this point in time. So
Oh,
I think
cool.
you guys could jam on that. Um, and my big point in that interview that I shared was like that same chef, David Breeden, who was at French Laundry. He is a lifer for Thomas Keller. He truly loves that restaurant group, and he's perfectly built for that restaurant group. He did a post on Instagram with 3 of his sons, and he was like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, this quarantine thing sucks, but I've gotten to spend more time with my sons in the past month than I've gotten to basically like ever.
Ever. Yeah.
And so I was like, my big thing for people during this time, like if you're the type of person who's like you're a hot apps cook and you can't go into your restaurant right now because it's currently closed, like I hope you're taking this time to like spend time with your kids if you have kids, or like
Yeah.
get into meditation, or go for a run like twice a week. You know, like I hope you're. Ryan Holiday has this great piece of will you choose alive time or dead time? And it's
Right.
basically like your flight gets delayed at the airport. Are you going to do a lap around the terminal to get some steps in, or are you going to cram a Cinnabon into your face? You
Right.
know, like, and that's what I think about during this time for everyone, where we could do all the pioneering of systems and assure people that it's safe in the world, but like, what is my aunt going to say when she comes to sit down?
Hmm.
How are you going to assure her that it's safe? And we don't have the answers to that yet. Like from the federal level, from the state level, from the leaders in our industry, like we haven't come to a head with it yet. And so my thoughts on this whole thing is like I'm gonna wait until the people that are smarter than me and have better standing in the community than me come up with the rules and assure people. Like I want to see those play out, and then we have to go from there. Like I'm not going to be ludicrous enough to think that like I'm going to be able to convince people to come to an event, and I can't promise them, you know what I mean? Even if I promise them that like for example, we we have some clients who are still planning things in the fall. Some of them have pushed things out from 2020 into 2021. And like I've had to send them menu revisions because we are currently not recommending that anybody does a family style menu right now.
Hmm.
It's like you can sit at a table of 5, but it's like we're going to plate all of your dishes, you
Yeah.
know? Because it's like we don't feel comfortable letting you pass plates around right now with bare hands. And it's like it's weird. It's weird, but it's like we have to take these things like on a contextual basis, and we're going to figure it out. We always have. I was at Per Se when HACCP plan for sous vide was getting developed.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and so that process was like I would get a bag, a Lexan full of uh, fish fillets and asparagus and beets, turned beets in cryovac bags, and then I would have to take them in the back into the dry storage to cryovac them, and then there would be a spreadsheet on a clipboard hung up on the wall, and I would have to document the pressure by which I sealed it, the time that
Hmm.
it was under pressure, the time when I sealed it, when it was going to be cooked, and a few other things. But they would use that information to go to the, what was it called, the golden apple, the green app, the big apple, like something health department stuff, and they
Yeah.
used that as a foundation to create a HACCP plan for sous vide as the entire like city of Manhattan, basically. And so like we're gonna figure it out. It's just when, and I don't. I'm trying to like urge everybody to like, as much as it sucks, you're so much better off not jumping the gun, because it's like anything that, I mean, I just don't want anybody to like speak out of frustration and just too much urgency, or put people at risk because they're too impatient to wait for the proper solutions here.
Yeah. Well, and a couple things. So if there's and Rodney kind of, I think, mentioned this, Rodney Dabin, says work and learn about ways to make it safe for our guests. I think that's maybe one of the biggest things that this is maybe giving us as an industry. You mentioned before, Justin, talking about proper, like glove hygiene and wash your hands, and I mean you can, and it's funny to me too. I'll like go to the grocery store and you see these people with gloves on, and in a food service setting, once you've done one task with your gloves, which is grabbing something or peeling whatever, now it's time to switch those gloves, wash your hands, and then put a new pair on. Um, and so I think it's hopefully at least kind of giving us a better sense of what personal hygiene is, and the average person to be a little bit more cognizant of it.
And the other thing is, it doesn't, we don't know if doing all of this work right now will eventually become overkill, right? Because
Right.
if this gets to a head where enough people have gotten the virus, when a health inspector comes to any restaurant in Seattle, King County, the first thing that they'll usually do is ask to see a copy of every single person's like health food workers card.
Right.
Who's to say that in 12 to 24 months they will ask to see copies of everybody's COVID vaccination reports?
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that
Oh,
could
yeah.
be the ultimate solution, because then as long as you've got that stamp next to your logo on your door, people know it's safe to come in. You
Right.
know, like, and until we come to that head, it's like everybody's like extrapolating this out to be like, oh, everybody's going to have to wear masks and 2 layers of gloves in their hands.
Hmm.
There might be a more elegant solution, and it might come to us in this really unique way.
Yeah.
But I totally hear everybody where it's like, I just want to open my doors again. I just want to like be able to pay payroll. I just want to be able to cook again. Um, yeah, it's
Well,
frustrating.
it's interesting too because you have like the PPP money,
Mm-hmm.
the payroll
Mm-hmm.
protection stuff. Then that's supposed to, I guess, start on. You have to at least initiate it by June 1st. Now
Totally.
you have all these restaurants that have X number of dollars to. I think 75% needs to go towards payroll. Well, if you don't have a full staff, or what's the point in maintaining a full staff if you don't have work for them to do?
Yeah, because I mean, for us, I think it's phase two. When we enter phase two, restaurants can only be at 50% capacity. So it's
Yeah.
like, how do you justify that?
Anthony, are you guys opening in full capacity? He says they're opening up this week. Um,
Yeah, what state are you in, Anthony?
he's in New York,
He's in New
I
York.
believe, upstate.
Nice.
What do you think? So Eric Garcia, he's a chef over at Google. Uh,
Mm.
he asked, "What do we think of cloud kitchens out here in the Bay Area? Food delivery is essential as COVID has taken all of our jobs." What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it was one of the biggest questions when this pandemic started was, is food from DoorDash or Uber Eats safe? And I think that like a lot of that was quickly debunked. But I think that it's going to be a trend that continues to grow. I think that like the trend has been showing progress in that direction over the past, I'd say 5 or 6 years, regardless of all of this happening. I'm a big proponent of like being able to use the space to your greatest advantage, and this is going to be like even more trying times now. Like how valuable is the role of the restaurant interior designer going to be over the next couple of years, right? Because restaurant layouts are going to have to change if we're not going to allow more than 6 people to sit at a table together, or there's going to have to be so many feet between seats or tables. And so your 250 seat place might have to get a bit of a revamp, and now you're only 140 seats.
And you
You
think
know,
of
so
like the French style bistro where you have the tables, right next to each other. I mean, that,
totally,
you know,
yeah, it's like a breeding ground, unnecessarily. Um, so yeah, I think that like we're gonna continue to see like people are forced, justifiably so, to diversify during this time. I think it's great. I think it's a really valuable hedge for people. Um, I think if I the one prediction that I did make was that we're going to either see um, diversity come on a day to day. So like you're going to have a dinner service that happens from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m., but then the rest of the day it's like you operate as a ghost kitchen. So like you're able to like pack things out in the dining room, and delivery drivers are coming and giving people lunch and doing all of this stuff because it's just more profitable. But then you're able to offer an in-person experience for dinner, and then maybe there's something about a cafe in the morning or something like that. Or we're going to see this thing where it's like it becomes super, we almost go back into the like very experiential, like we're only open for like 5 months out of the year kind of thing. Because the numbers just don't work out for us to be open all 12 months of the year. Because
I,
you're
I,
almost creating that scarcity through decreasing your opening times.
I like the
So
idea. I like the
mm,
idea what you mentioned with having the dinner from 5 to 9 or
yeah,
whatever that might look like, and then having an alternate revenue stream the rest of the day. You obviously need to have that. All right, this is what we're known for. This is the experience you can come in and have, and that's how somebody knows the brand and how you build the brand. But then, all right, I know for us, even like before all this kind of stuff happened, like for us to make it profitable to be able to kind of keep the doors open, if we were able to get like a catering order out earlier in the morning before we even started business, those are the kind of things that saved us in the early days. And
it
and
also like
yeah,
it also gives you the ability to iterate and do new concepts. Like how many restaurants do you and I know that like they do ramen on Wednesday nights, which is like their slow night, or they have like
right.
a secret menu for late night happy hour where they do this crazy amazing burger. Like who's to say that your restaurant then cannot be like super uber focused, because you know what that menu is, you know how to have it consistent, like you know when your service hours are, you can keep track of guest counts and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can do the fun stuff as the ghost kitchen, because that's going out as delivery, and it's like you can iterate on concepts and bring people new ideas and beta test things. um
Menu items or even like different concepts within the walls of your kitchen.
exactly, like there's that's where ghost kitchens play out, where it's like
Yeah.
you read about these people where there's like the American Chinese place and the taco place and the Middle Eastern place all operating under the same roof. It's the same line, but
Right.
three menus are getting executed across that line during the day or during the evening. um and then like we see these other trends of like apartment buildings are designing like condos and apartments to have smaller kitchen spaces because they're just realizing that people are cooking less.
Mm-hmm.
um so like I don't think the trend is going anywhere. I think we're going to see more of it.
Yeah, yeah. But like you mentioned before too, is all right. So we had this time. What are we gonna do with it? I was
Mm.
listening to another good podcast episode Tim Ferriss had on Nick Kokonis.
Yeah, I really want to listen to that one. I just saw that come out and I love their first interview together.
Yeah, it was really good. Obviously, he talked about some of the. So he's partnered with Grant Achatz up at
Mm.
Next Restaurant Group, and but they were talking about all this stuff, and they were they watched Canlis over in Seattle be one of the early adopters of some of this kind of to go type stuff and recommended them do it. But then one of the points he was making was, well, the governor extended the stay at place order through June 1st, whatever. So he's like, well, so we know that we're at least doing this for the next month. So what are we gonna do with that? And I think people being resourceful, whether it's at work or at home with their times, super helpful.
Yeah, they're killing it. And for the one kind of like delivery offering that we have going, we are using Talk to Go as well. Like it's a great
Yeah, yeah.
platform. Like there's a lot of
Well,
great
I had a
marketing
question for
tools
you
built
too.
in. Say
I
that
mean,
again?
Justin, you think that so like I think they were talking in their this episode with Tim Ferriss. He was saying that I don't know if it's the restaurant group itself or Alinea, but they had their number one grossing sales day like last week or a couple weeks ago. Um, I assume for them, part of that is they built this really successful brand. I mean, the brand of the restaurants, but also of the chef, Grant Achatz. I see it maybe for helping easier for them. Oh, I can get a meal from Millennia for $30. I don't have to go in and spend 300. I don't know.
I would say that's partially the case. I think that like you're not I think they've done a really good job about being clear in their marketing that it's not the 21 course tasting menu coming to your door. It's
But
like
still kind of cool to
it's
you know
super cool. And like that's how long have they been
they're doing
open?
like a Braves short rib Wellington.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah,
like you're seeing 12 years or something like that of brand equity paying off for them,
right.
right? Because they've built the status in that city of like Canlis is exactly the same here. Like
Yeah,
they're not calling their to go offering anything special. They literally call it family meal.
yeah,
But because people compare them with or they associate them with high end, luxurious, sometimes expensive, to be able to get a meal from them for $42 a person seems like a screaming good deal.
yeah, yeah. And then there's obviously for either one of those restaurants when you're paying $100, $200, $300 a person for multi courses. You're paying for the courses, but obviously the experience. I know I haven't been to Canlis, but I know like looks over Seattle, like
Mm-hmm.
beautiful setup. It's all very intentional. Like I've been to Per Se, like overlooks like the southwest corner of Central Park, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of New York restaurants, I assume you saw the article. Chef David Hume potentially, or at least putting out there that maybe they wouldn't open back up.
Totally. We just had that happen with he's a James Beard award winning chef here in Seattle. He has a restaurant called Il Corvo, and they would just do 3 types of pastas during lunchtime. There's constantly a line. He opened up his place in West Seattle called Il Nido, which is like a market dinner style place. And Il Corvo's not opening back up again.
Really?
Like, yeah, it's like
Could
he's
you
one
see
of
like 11 Madison Park not reopening?
I don't well, so 11 Madison Park is interesting because
Did you go there
they
while you were, or did you ever?
yeah. Yeah, well, so I did have a meal there with my dad 3 or 4 summers ago. I was in New York last winter, and I had a drink there at the bar. I never got to eat there before they had 3 Michelin stars because that was
Gotcha.
also like they were really on the cutting edge at that time. Um, but 11 Madison Park's in an interesting spot because they've done a really good job with their Made Nice group of going beyond 11 Madison Park with their partnership with the Nomad hotels and just like their fast casual, like they can pop up on a corner as a Made Nice concept and just do like fast casual concepts. And Will Gadara and Daniel Hume are split up, quote unquote, as
Right.
business partners now. And so it's like they're in an interesting place because I think they have enough people on their side where it's not necessarily going to be completely like a shot in the foot for them to like I don't it would be surprising for me to see them go under as opposed to comparing it with another 3 Michelin star restaurant in New York that doesn't have the infrastructure of more locations. I'm thinking of like Chef's Table at Brooklyn Fair.
Right.
I can see them closing down first before I see 11 Madison Park closing.
When I
Um,
think if Will was still there, I think there'd be no question about it staying open.
totally, totally. Hmm.
And but Chef was saying like it'd be like I think he used the term millions of dollars to open up. Now I get the luxuriousness of 11 Madison Park, especially after the renovation 3-4 years ago, whenever it was.
Gorgeous, yeah.
But and obviously like you're gonna one of the biggest expenses that nobody's really talking about too is inventory.
Hmm.
Buying entirely new inventory aside from dry goods. You're having to buy all new proteins and produce and everything else. And for them with fancy caviar and lobster and foie gras, I mean it's obviously going to be super expensive. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the millions of dollars part though.
Yeah, it's tricky, but like they have set up their reservation system where it's like you buy your table months in advance. So it's like
Right.
the second they open that booking system, there's this spike in cash flow. All of a sudden, like they're okay. You know what I mean? Like they've built, talking about brand equity too, you associate a nice dining experience in Midtown Manhattan, 11 Madison Park's probably on the top of your list of where you're going to want to go. I mean, there's something about like, what is one of the big things that happened out of like it was either World War II or like the Great Depression. Like the circus was doing like surprisingly well because like
Oh,
people just
really?
wanted like escapism and like entertainment.
Same idea, I
And
guess.
yeah, like there's no shortage of people, I don't think, in Manhattan or Brooklyn who are just like they're completely okay living in their, you know, high-rise apartments, and the second they get an opportunity to go out and be entertained with a meal, they're like it's going to be a no-brainer. So
Hmm.
that's why I think like a place like 11 Madison Park, because of the work that they've done and their standing in the city,
Yeah.
is going to be fine.
Yeah. And you mentioned like their reservation system opens up. Now they have cash flow coming in. I was reading somewhere else too. Someone was talking about, like the whole idea of like gift cards, right? So like you can maybe try and sell gift cards. And um, if you don't do that right though, then now you have revenue that's come in that has already been accounted for, a week or two ago or a month ago, once the people actually come in and spend it. So,
Yeah, I think
um,
Nick Kokonis has been tweeting about, and the language that he used with gift cards for restaurants right now is mortgaging your future as a restaurant, where it's
yeah,
like, like, yeah, it might be in the mortgage sense. It's like, yeah, you can have this house now, but like, how are you going to pay for the costs of owning it? You know what I mean? Down the
well,
road. And
I
like,
think there are smart ways of doing it. You like even
100%,
like
100%.
like I know Groupon when they started, and maybe they still do. They
Mm,
do like you can only sell X number of Groupons. You could do the gift cards like that. You could also do all right. We'll only sell 100 or an X number of gift cards for this week or for this month. Where all right, like we're out for this month, but if you want to buy somewhere you can come for November or December, and then you also might probably get less redemption for some of those gift cards. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I always wondered. I've covered some stories on my podcast before about restaurants that will do Kickstarter programs to open, and I was always so confused by the idea that part of the like some of their Kickstarter uh, levels where you
Reward,
could
yeah,
support was like the same price as the menu. It's like you're pre-selling tickets to these experiences. So like in my mind, if I'm going to support you as a restaurant, it's like I'd almost rather pay like 30-40% more than what the ticket price is, because I know that like that's only going to cover your, and this is like again back to me knowing the numbers of all of these things.
right,
Like I know that only covers your costs plus maybe 10%. So like why would you not then ask for 30% on top of that to like here's how we're going to help open the doors,
right.
Um
You're basically
so yeah,
mortgaging your future in
yeah,
very
exactly.
similar
So
way.
like charge a touch more on that, because it's like when the bank expects some interest. Why would you know what I mean? Like why would you not expect to? Because it then the numbers don't work out because you're yeah it's too lopsided.
Yeah. Well, and I guess speaking of the numbers, we'll see what happens with the next kind of 6 months. I mean, obviously with Anthony talking about, so he's in Alabama. Sorry,
Yep.
Anthony.
No, you're
But
good.
50% capacity.
Mm.
Um, you know, maybe you can do 2 turns at 50% capacity, but like we all know, like for most places that the numbers just don't work. So we'll see what happens, man. When do you
Yeah.
think you guys will start back with doing events?
So we're really looking to in talking about taking advice from people that are smarter than us. We have to look at the phase plans for our state, just in general. So like, if gatherings of 25 becomes available in 1st of July, what does that package look like for someone to book an event with us?
Mhm.
So like we tailor it for what the current rules have in place. So you can, we know which venues in town can support gatherings of that many people with safe social distancing measures. Um, I have menus ready to go that serve well for that number of people. Um, like that's how we're kind of like hoping to position ourselves at this point in time,
Yeah.
because those are going to be the rules, like no one's going to call us. Like we were supposed to produce an 800-person gala at the end of March,
Oh
and
wow.
it got canceled because like in like the governor was supposed to come to that. Like there's no way that that was going to happen.
Yeah.
um in those times. And so we're trying to be thoughtful with our resource allocation, in the sense of we're not going to try to think about 100-person gatherings in any capacity, because we just have to deal with like what can we do right now. And what we hopefully will be able to do soon is like 15 to 25 people coming together. Everybody knows each other. um, we've
Right.
kind of discussed this idea of like, how do you create, we have a couple of venues that we work pretty closely with here in Seattle, and we've thought about what does it look like to have like an event that we stage all the decor, we get everything basically like ready inside of the space, and then one of our team members basically like uh like meets you almost contact
Like a drop
free
off
into the
theory almost.
space. Yeah, but like you can come in with your party and have a party in the space, because everyone's itching to like get together
Right.
right now. And so like you walk into this space and it's beautiful and it's ready, and like the food's ready to go in some way, shape, or form. And then you can have your party and then you can leave, which then also sets our team up to be safe to go then break down, where
Right.
we're not like dealing with guests walking around. And so like those are the types of things we're thinking about, just to make sure that we're not fitting a square peg in a round hole, because we want to do larger gatherings
Mhm.
and do all of these ideas that we had for 2020. But if it's not going to happen, like we just need to be practical and pragmatic about it. So
Well,
that's
and
that's more or less that.
one of the good things I think is that, say there is a second outbreak or a second wave,
Mm,
or like 3, 4, 5, I mean, who's this? Obviously, this hasn't happened in 100 years, whatever, to this magnitude. But who's to say it couldn't happen at some point down the road in the near future? So, if nothing else, at least it gives us a roadmap for kind of how to navigate the waters in the future.
totally.
Um, Justin, it's been fun, man.
Always good to catch
Go
up,
ahead,
man.
yeah, man. Go ahead and just talk for another quick second about your podcast and
Yeah.
what you do.
Yeah. So all the content that I put out is the content I wish I had when I was in culinary school. I was obviously like a very ambitious young cook who just like, I wanted to eat up all the information in the world. Like the first time I saw the Alinea website, I was like, I need to go work here.
Mhm.
Like I was just such a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kind of, that was my start. And I would follow the Andy Halers and the Bonjoing Lees of the world with their blogs when they would they would go to San Sebastian, they would go to Paris, they
A
would
beautiful
go
place.
to,
Sebastian's awesome too.
yeah, like they would go to these places and they would do a really good job of like taking photos with a DSLR. I mean, this, for everybody's context, this is back in like 2009, 2010. They would take really beautiful photos. Spanish Hipster was another one. Um, and they would post these documented experiences of their meals. And I just ate it up, man, because it was like, this was before Instagram. Like you could see more food than ever. And those chefs stopped, those bloggers stopped blogging. And so I was like, where do I get my insider knowledge? Because like then everything went into personal brand mode where you would only see the perfect photo shoot dish of like whatever Daniel Hume wanted you to see is what you would
Right.
see. And I just I wanted a way to process. And and the other catalyst for me wanting to do all of this was Eater brought all of their writing in-house.
Okay.
And so they stopped basically asking freelance journalists to contribute to Eater. And they will do it at certain times now, but I was very frustrated when certain people from Eater, Grub Street, insert the publication,
Yeah.
would put out a news story in a very this was at like 2017, 2016 trends, which was like, we need to just do it for clicks. Doesn't really
Right.
matter what the information says. It's like, oh, so and so chef is out, this chef is in, or like, how do we as an industry process what happened with Mario Batali? How do we process minimum wage going higher? How do we process chefs stealing other chefs' ideas? And it's like, I wanted to be able to offer my 2 cents on kind of like what was happening in the industry. And so that's more or less what the podcast does and serves to do. And then the YouTube channel is just like, I review knives, I talk about gear, I talk about like advice that I wish my younger self knew when I was first starting off. And it's just it's fun because it's like, it allows me, I think about it in the context of when I created a dish at a restaurant, if we were packed and I had this, like, I had a great langoustine dish and it was on the tasting menu and we had 110 guests come in that night, probably like 10% of them have allergies. They probably won't get that dish. So I served 100 people that idea that day. And I thought about it and I was like, I remember the moment when I hit like 100 YouTube subscribers. And I was like, when you have 100 YouTube subscribers, you're getting like maybe 500 views a day because you have so many backlogged videos. And I was like, this is kind of cool. Like, this is like really cool that as a professional, my ideas are not just limited to like what I can do in person. And this can kind of like serve as a way to help people and go beyond kind of like, because a lot of people measure chefs in the impact and the legacy that they'll make of like the people that came through their kitchens.
Right.
Right.
They're coaching
And
for you, essentially.
yeah, exactly. And to me, I think that we've gone so far beyond that. I don't think that we, like we talk about Gordon Ramsay learning under Marco Pierre White, or we talk about Grant Achatz learning under Thomas Keller for 8 years or whatever, and then he went to El Bulli and got super inspired, and then boom, Trio, and then Alinea, and then that was like his story. I think that we are at a stage now where young cooks are getting inspired from so many places. Like staging culture is just like so baked into the industry as a whole. And if then the idea is that I can get more reach and positively impact more people by doing this thing that scales on the internet, because I'm not married to the fact that so many, I only want you to come through my kitchens and learn from me.
Right.
And everybody's going to be learning from everybody. My goal then should be, I should positively impact one piece of your professional puzzle. Like, that's all I want to do. Because I know that you're going to get some advice from Chris Hill. You're going to get some advice from Daniel Hume. You're going to get some advice from anybody. And that's going to be like, that's the goal with all this stuff. And so, yeah, if you want to find me, search my name on YouTube, Emulsion Podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And
yeah, I mean, in that respect, I think we have very similar objectives.
Yeah, exactly.
And your your YouTube page has blown up. I mean, how many subscribers you have? You do,
I'm like just shy of 20,000 now.
Yeah, I mean, you have some some videos that have a bunch of views,
Totally.
and like with anything, like it didn't start out with 20,000 followers, right? Like with my page here on Facebook, like it takes a while to kind of build up, but once you do it, once you get some steam, it makes it a little bit easier to keep it too, I think.
It's also like you and I were talking before we turned the mics on. Like it's nice to have something to turn the my chef analogy is like to turn the burner up on. Like if you can't do the one thing, at least like I don't know, man. Like you happen to type a lot for your book right now, and you fall and break your hand. Like you can do podcasts. Because you have this other type of thing that you can do, and I think that everybody like rushed to social media when everybody needed their guests to know that they were doing deliveries, and all of
Right,
a sudden it was like, oh shit, we probably should have taken this seriously, like
right.
before pre-pandemic.
Because
And
now it's too
so
late.
yeah,
Now
now it's too
it's too
late.
late.
Now you're competing with everybody, and the real audience that you should have had doesn't know. You know what I mean? Like they don't have that relationship with you quite yet.
Yeah.
um
That's why I think now, the next however long, the goal. I heard Gary Vee talking a little bit about this kind of stuff.
mm,
But the goal should be not to get the next sale, which I get that for certain people trying to kind of live another day. But how can you kind of build the brand so that once things do go back to normal, how can you be like the number one person? Because we're all going to get like once things open up, what's the number one place that you want to go to, right? And how can you as a restaurant owner or manager or chef make your place that location? So
yeah, to echo that, like his biggest restaurant piece of restaurant advice for people right now, because a lot of people might be thinking like, oh well, social media is hard for me right now because I'm not open and I don't have photos of my dishes. It doesn't have to be that. Like I think the biggest a piece of advice that he gave was like, if you own a restaurant, you should go tour that restaurant and say why you chose the wood paneling for the walls. Why do you dredge your chicken in buttermilk? Like
yeah,
you can
man,
provide value in like how'd you get the idea for this rice dish that you're making? um it doesn't have to be like, open your mind up beyond just like what you see as flashy and fancy on Instagram, because there is so much more to it that you can use to engage and build a community that then when you either need to ask for help or you're going to open up again or you're launching a new concept, then you ultimately have someone to share this info with.
and all that stuff, but also like, all right, like what are my how can I kind of tell the stories of my staff
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right now so that we're all kind of missing like the community aspect of certain parts of our lives. Well, all right, like here's our business, and that just gives people more of a reason to kind of buy into what you're doing as well.
And it also deflates that idea that social media has to be this like uh narcissistic ego kind
Right,
of like I'm a personal brand kind of thing on
right.
the internet, which like a lot of people just they aren't comfortable with that, and that's okay. But like it's not an excuse to then not act on this completely. And I I still have to hammer this home for people. It's free to do.
Right.
Like you can hire an agency for $5,000 a month that does your PR for you, or while you have some extra time on your hands, you can DIY it a little bit and make sure that the story is actually true to you. And
Because
so
someone outside of your company is not going to be able to get the right story anyway.
totally. So like why would you not take that free to play kind of like advantage and use it in a way that's unique to you? I follow a great page. It's a restaurant out of Minneapolis called the Grand Cafe, and their their Instagram page is just memes, but like
Yeah.
it's so funny because it's like they'll post a photo of like a stupid funny like celebration meme, and it's like it's Friday, see you tonight, and it's like everybody loves following them because it's so funny and it's so refreshing in your feed to like see something that's actually uh it's just like it makes you happy, like it gives you a hit
Right.
of dopamine when you see it, and so then you associate Grand Cafe with happy, and so then
And you're
it's like
sharing
this
it.
weird it's like this indirect way of marketing where it's like, oh, because I've seen this and it's a psychological, I positively associate with this brand, so that when me and my fiance want to go out for our anniversary dinner, what's going to come top of mind? Grand Cafe. That's where we're going to go.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, just like because and I'm glad we touched on this, because I think that there's a lot of people who even in 2020, you know, you and I are talking about like we've been building this up for like, you know, for you it's like a decade, for me
Yeah.
it's like coming up on half a decade now. And it's like, I thought in 2015 I was too late to come to
Right.
YouTube, you know, and people are still saying that, you know what I mean? Um, it's going to be forever, man.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. The opportunity is there. And I think it's cool how you, and I think I try to do the same thing of taking two things that you're really, really interested in, and kind of bringing them together. So,
totally. Totally.
well, Justin, yeah, thanks for hanging out, man.
Always a pleasure, man.
Definitely check out the Emulsion podcast. Check out his website, his YouTube page. We'll talk soon, all right, brother?
All right, man.
Thanks,
Always a
buddy.
pleasure. Thanks again.
Hey, man. Talk soon.